This is the moment a New Glenn rocket turned into a fireball during testing at Cape Canaveral, just days before it was supposed to fly. This wasn't just a rocket exploding. It may have been an entire launch schedule catching fire. The question isn't just what blew up, it's how much of the business plan was depending on it. The real damage may unfold over months. In the hours following the explosion, Blue Origin's official line was measured, calm, understated. The situation was described as an anomaly during the hot fire test, a ground test where the engines are fired while the rocket stays clamped to the pad. Jeff Bezos highlighted that all personnel are accounted for and safe, and that it's too early to know the root cause, but we're already working to find it. Nobody was hurt. So here's the question that actually matters. If everyone walked away safe and this was just a test, what makes it such a serious setback? To understand the answer, we must first examine what this rocket was being readied to do. This New Glenn wasn't being prepared for a demo or to deliver a dummy payload. Its next mission was set to carry 48 real satellites for Amazon's LEO internet service, the constellation meant to compete with SpaceX's Starlink, with liftoff targeted for as soon as June 4th. What Blue Origin lost in that fireball was the vehicle meant to fly it and the schedule that came with it. So what happens when we follow that cost downstream? Let's start by looking at the vehicle itself. New Glenn is not a small rocket. It's roughly 98 meters tall, among the largest rockets ever built. A machine that size is not something you pull off a shelf and swap in for next week. Each New Glenn rocket represents months of manufacturing and integration, so losing a complete flight-ready vehicle already amounts to months of labor and manufacturing hours gone in just a few seconds. Then there's the pad. A rocket like this launches from purpose-built ground infrastructure, fueling systems, support structures, the physical site itself. An explosion that destroys the rocket during a test on the launch pad like this damages that infrastructure too, and it raises real questions about what role, if any, the pad played in the failure. The exact cause still hasn't been made public, but in the days since, the picture of the damage has grown clearer and more sobering. Reuters, citing people familiar with the matter, reported that the blast set the program back by months, with one source describing the pad as practically destroyed and estimating at least 6 months of disruption. Blue Origin hasn't put an official number on it. Either way, it underscores the point. A program can be grounded not just by a lost rocket, but by the pad it launches from. Blue Origin says it has already regained partial access to the site, is investigating what it's calling a hot fire anomaly, and is drawing up a plan to clear and rebuild the pad. There's a glimmer of good news too. The company says the booster and upper stage hardware sitting in its nearby integration facility appear healthy, which means not every piece of New Glenn hardware was caught in the blast. Which brings us to our next cost, and it waits for no one. Time. Amazon's satellite deployment was on a schedule, a tight one. They've been racing to build out a network while SpaceX's Starlink is already operational, providing SpaceX with a notable early lead. Now Amazon is publicly playing down the damage. In an internal memo, its satellite leadership told staff that it's too early to speculate on the cause, that the satellites are secure, and that Amazon still has well over 100 launches lined up, with New Glenn accounting for less than a quarter of them. But here's the catch. New Glenn was a major part of Amazon's deployment cadence, so losing that capacity, even temporarily, piles pressure onto an already tight timeline. Musk, for his part, gave words of encouragement in replying ad astra per aspera to Jeff Bezos's tweet, Latin for through hardships to the stars, an acknowledgement of the challenges inherent in such ambitious pursuits as these two men's companies have undertaken to push humanity's horizons out to the stars. The competitive impact of the test gone wrong, however, remains a serious blow to Bezos's companies. With every week the New Glenn is grounded, SpaceX can widen its lead. That's the quiet cost. In the space race, time is money. A lot of money. And here's what makes this failure sting more than some past test mishaps. New Glenn isn't an unproven concept fresh off the drawing board. It had carried NASA's Escapade mission to space, launching from Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral back on November 13, 2025. This is a program with years of development behind it and a real successful flight to its name. So this wasn't a first flight learning experience anyone expected to be rough. It was a trusted vehicle, loaded for a major commercial job, lost on the ground. In commercial spaceflight, the whole business model runs on cadence, launching often and reliably enough that customers will bet their satellites and their schedules on you. Especially today, as NASA ramps up for an intensifying space race to the moon, that has thus far seen its own costly delays. So a failure that thankfully cost no lives still cost Blue Origin a vehicle, set back a launch pad, stalled Amazon's satellite constellation, and handed time to its closest rival. TechCrunch reported today that Blue Origin's CEO expects New Glenn will fly again by the end of this year, despite last week's massive explosion. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to create more like it, please consider supporting the channel by liking the video or subscribing to the channel below. Your support is the only way we grow. Until next time, thank you and stay curious.